And I think that there's an evolutionary bias. I mean, I don't even think it's like a societal bias. I mean, like, they did a study back at Harvard where they looking at bias, and they found that height was more or as significant of a bias in the current day as the color of your skin.
Wow.
Or your race. But I think it's worse than that, because those are only social. Like, those are not real things. The color of your skin, like what religion you are, they all made those up, right? Like a bazillion years ago, we didn't have those things, right? Like, I mean, like in the sense of like, these are all social things, what country you're from or whatever. I mean, doesn't exist like millions of years ago.
Never
right?
thought of that.
But height always existed. Okay.
And what you could do because you were tall.
Correct. So it's evolutionary. Would you take on a bear? I wouldn't.
I would not.
There's this primitive side to what it is, right? I mean, like, if someone's walking up to you and they're, 6'10", this big guy, you're going to move out of the way.
Welcome to the Attorneys on Accident podcast with your hosts, Joe Worth and Ash Blackburn. We are sitting down with the preeminent leg lengthening surgeon, not just in the country, but in the world. And it's such a privilege and honor to have Dr. Kevin Debiparshad with us. He's actually here in Las Vegas. His company is called Limb-Plastics with an X on the end of that. And he's going to talk to us about all things leg lengthening. Let's get into it. And you are somebody that is at the forefront of actually being able to make people taller, which I know Ash and I am talking about having you come on. There are a lot of people that still don't know this is real, right? In 1997, I saw the movie Gattaca with Ethan Hawke and Jude Law. And there's that famous scene that you're well aware of where he's like, listen, Jude Law is 6'1", and if you want to be him, it's not going to be enough to put some lifts in your shoes. You're going to have to do this procedure. And I remember thinking like, oh, that's wild, but just that it was science fiction. So here you are, Dr. Debiparshad, at the center of something that, is it controversial?
So, I think any, cosmetic elective surgery, you can probably categorize as somewhat controversial. I think the controversy has changed a little bit, right? I mean, I think that as decades have evolved in the realm of cosmetic surgery or these elective procedures that we do, we start to having a more of an acceptance for it, right? I mean, and we've seen that. I think we accept a lot more today than we did 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago. So I do think there's a lot more acceptance in it. I think there's this idea of, really just be who you want to be. And I think there's this idea of accepting, if you want to do something that makes you feel better, we're going to cheer for you. But I still think there's controversy with it. I think there's always those people that say, you're perfect the way you are. You don't need to change anything about you, but they're not living in your shoes. And I think that goes for all cosmetic procedures, not just this. I think it goes for anyone, even looking at the transgender community potentially, right? Look how much we've accepted when looking at that and how that's become a movement in some ways, right? So there's a lot of things I think that has changed the way we look at the world of cosmetics and the way that, person feels about themselves and what they want to change about themselves. But I think overall we have a good understanding that it's that patient's body and it's they can be whoever they choose to be.
Okay, well, we're going to get into sort of the issues surrounding we want to know your personal opinion on it. And Ash has had a procedure that she's going to talk about a little bit later on. But before we go down that road, we do want to know how it is you got to where you got, right? We're attorneys on accident, and we want to know about your path. And was it a direct line? Was it full of twists and turns to this point in your life?
Yeah, I mean, so, like every person starting out, I think I didn't know I was going to be doing this. I think that as I got exposure through like medical school, I always thought, I'm going to be a doctor. It sounds like a great career. I can help people. And then I had an affinity towards the biological sciences. So I was like, I'm pretty good at this. And so as I entered into it, I thought, I started getting some exposure to orthopedics, and I thought, this could be interesting. A lot of form on function. It seemed very like, here's a problem, you fix it, person gets better. It seems like very, directly related. I liked that idea. It probably wasn't until, almost a little over 20 years probably now that I did a rotation in Vancouver with a fairly famous surgeon, has a few procedures named after him, Dr. Ken Brown. And, he specialized in pediatric limb deformity. A lot of the work he did was with Liz Roth frames. This is where the concept of everything that we do, or at least when it comes to limb lengthening, comes from, because it comes from the idea of distraction osteogenesis, the idea of pulling apart bone, and bone will grow in that void that is created by moving it apart. And so he was one of the pioneers in that field.
This is when you have those gnarly pictures with the external fixators, right?
Correct. Yeah. So similar to Gattaca. So my old mentor actually designed the set for Gattaca. And
Is that right?
Yeah. So that's like one of his claims to fame. I think when I was doing his fellowship.
Hey, that's a cool claim to fame.
Yeah. So.
And what kind of deformities, like, was he working on to...
Yeah, so, you don't realize it, but, you can be born as a kid with a limb length discrepancy. You could have a leg that's bent the wrong way. You could have club foot. You could have... There's actually a lot of congenital deformities that are present in children, and you are able to kind of fix these. And one of the easier ways, and we still do them to this day, is an external fixator. And so we apply these external fixators, and these are basically, hexapods that can move in six planes essentially, right? And you can actually manipulate the bone and the leg or the tissue and put it into the position you need it to be in.
Mm-hmm.
So, after seeing that, I was, I think, a second year medical student at the time, and I think I saw, a kid come in with one of these frames on, and I looked at the x-rays, and I thought, I saw this 2 inches of bone, like, just growing on the x-ray, and I was like, what is going on here? I didn't understand. I was just starting second year medical med school.
It seemed fake.
Well,
not real.
I was like, I didn't even understand what was going on. Then they explained it to me. I'm like, so you just like literally grew this kid's leg 2 inches and grew it back and made it normal again? And they said, yeah. And I thought to myself, like, in everything I've read in the medical field, from miraculous antibiotics to chemotherapies to cures for this to, cool surgeries, I thought this is like magic. It seems like magic, and it hadn't been around for like 60, 70 years at that point. And I thought, the world needs to know more about this, or I need to know more about this. And that's really where the fire got lit. And when I saw this, I thought, this is going to be something that I'm going to be a part of.
Yeah.
Really? I mean, you had this inception point, and did you feel it that deeply? Like, I'm going to be part of this?
It haunted me, yeah. So
check it.
So for all the years after, I did pretty well. Finished medical school, gone to orthopedics. A lot of career opportunities in orthopedics. Could have done total joints. Could have, I actually went on to a fellowship of spinal surgery, which is also a great career. I could do pretty well with that. Have a great career. Have a nice house. Do all this sort of stuff. But it always haunted me. It always, anytime I dreamt about something, or I walked around my apartment when I was a resident med student, I would think about, applications of it, the technology around it. I'd obsess about it. And it didn't leave me alone, to the point where I just said, you know what? I'm just going to do a fellowship in spine surgery, and then I'm going to do another fellowship in limb deformity.
Make sure that I really want it.
And it's a year, and if anything, like, if it doesn't work out, then it doesn't work out. I still got, great career paths ahead of me, and I thought I just have to do it. Yeah. And so I just, and even when I talk to my senior advisors and I say, hey, I'm going to do this and this, they're like, okay, that seems interesting. And I'm like, but I don't think they saw what I saw, and and I thought that at least let me explore it. It's a year of my life. I mean, it's not the end of the world, and maybe spent a little more than that on it. But as I kind of went through it, like, I knew that it was where I was supposed to be. I mean, I knew that there was a lot of potential in the space, and I knew that this would be big. And I knew that, and I think even to this point, it's still nothing.
Cosmetically, you knew it was going to be big?
I think cosmetic was one application of it. I think there's other applications of it, though. I think even looking at the technology, I saw the potential of these mobile implants moving in the body, and I thought, oh, that's kind of neat. And the fact that like if you can do that, you just have to be imaginative. You can do anything. I mean, right? Like, I mean, if I can grow someone 6 inches, 8 inches, I mean, there's a lot of potential and a lot of plasticity in there. And if the implants can do that, particularly these remote-based implants, if I can move the biggest bone in your body 3 inches down the road, then there's a lot more I can do with the same technology that could be revolutionary, potentially.
You're not helping the whole Dr. God complex thing.
No, but I mean, I do think it is a unique, revolutionary type of both technology and even clinical application. I mean, even if you think outside the box, I mean, think about a soft tissue defect. I mean, if you had somewhere that didn't have soft tissue, like let's say you lost it in a burn or something like that, you could just take out part of the leg that is devoid of the soft tissue, shrink the leg, and then regrow the remaining leg. Right? Like one thing my mentor always said is that like you're only limited by your imagination in this particular field, which and I think there's more to be explored in that overall. Like, you talk about limb lengthening and stuff I do. I mean, I just finished doing a case last week of a limb shortening patient. I made someone 3 inches shorter. I mean, and I use the same technology to do it. I mean, so, and that may be for a cosmetic reason, but I do think that the idea of what we do, I think, even in the cosmetic realm, I agree. I think that realm is still in its infancy. I think there's more popularity and there's more. You mentioned the GQ article. The editor of GQ reached out to me after that article launched, and it was the largest article in the history of GQ. I don't know if you knew that.
Wow.
It was the longest article?
It had made the most views ever.
Wow.
And so they called me to thank me for doing the article. Because when I initially did the article, I was like, oh, yeah, this sounds like another article I'm going to do. And, they want to, get the eyeballs and all the Google.
Right.
Because it's one of those things, especially during that time, people were just fascinated, right? Like,
it is fascinating, though.
Yeah,
right? And so people see it from that effect, and that editor was actually a very nice guy. He actually considered getting it himself, which was interesting. He actually did a couple podcasts afterwards, and I listened to him talk. And it's so funny. It was such a meaningful article in some ways because the editor, he was short, and it was an issue because his wife is taller than he is, and they had known each other for decades. And they actually had a podcast where they were both on it, and she actually admitted that it was an issue. She's like, well, I never really considered him as someone intimate or like someone. Right. We were always friends, and he was always in the friend zone. And then years later, I think when they were in New York, and he started maybe I think working for GQ, maybe another article, maybe another magazine. They kind of met each other again and started talking, and then it flourished, and them getting married and they had kids, but it was a limitation, and she actually said that, which I thought was kind of interesting. But at this point, it's not. But it was something that I think it was personal to him. That's why I think he did the article. And it turned out to be very good. And I think in the end, better than they even thought it was going to be, because it did so well for the magazine. Because even when they approached me, and I was like, oh, GQ, it used to be popular when I was like a teenager. It wasn't really that popular. But after that article, I think it was number one Apple News for 72 hours, something like that internationally. I think it made the top article for
was that
countries.
Part of the allure for you to do this? Was that here was a rock that nobody was looking under, and you saw gold beneath it?
I think I saw potential, I guess. Yeah. Like I would see, and a couple things, like my mentor did cosmetic procedures, and, I saw him do them. A couple things that bothered me about it though was that, he almost did it in secrecy, right? So I felt that you get these patients who kind of knew about it through the dark web or something. Yeah. And because it wasn't very popular, and said, oh, we could do this. And, there's a guy who's pretty good at this. And so they would the patient would come, and then the surgeon would be like, oh, we're going to go do this. And they would go in the back room, get it done, and come out. So I felt like there was this characteristic about the patient that they were kind of ashamed of. Mm-hmm. But then you had a surgeon that was kind of also seemingly ashamed of doing the procedure. So I thought that was a weird kind of thing. So I felt that if I offered this and went forward and did this, I really wouldn't do that.
You'd be loud about it.
I would not be loud, but I would embrace it. And I would say, look, this is a thing. I think it's extraordinarily safe. I think in the right hands, it can be done very, very well. And I think it's actually one of the most successful procedures that I do. And so, I think I just want to be it's not something you should be ashamed of. If there's something you want to do, and this is something that will be meaningful to you, then you should do it. Right? So I think, and I don't think there's anything to be ashamed about. I think if you want, now a lot of patients don't talk about it when they have it done, but some do, right? Some come with their loved ones. Some
How
come
do you
with their...
avoid talking about?
Oh, I read about GQ article. There was some funny stuff where one guy said I just told people I got a skiing accident, and then I got to recover from a skiing accident, hit a tree.
Okay.
You've probably heard better ones than that.
Yeah, no, there's lots of different ones. Sometimes it's hard to perceive, right? If Joe Campione was 3 inches taller, you might say, you look different. He might have always been taller than you, but you might not know, and maybe because it's maybe not as popular, you might not think, oh, did this person get taller than me? I've done people here in town that, I see on a routine basis, and, people come to me, what do they say? And they say, oh, you look taller, or maybe some people think they're shrinking because that's more reasonable.
Look up you're shrinking.
Yeah. So I think there's different things, but I think it's also like you said, you might think it's impossible, so this couldn't be a thing. So maybe they just look different. They got a haircut, they lost weight. I don't know what it is, but you look different. Sometimes it can be more obvious.
As long as you don't do in the Saturday Night Live sketch, did you watch that one?
No, I didn't see it.
Yeah, as long as you don't start a Kickstarter campaign and get the $100,000 for it, and then they find out.
Yeah, they reached out to me for those. They did 2 Saturday Night Live skits about it, actually. So they did the one with the guy, what's his name? Jack Harlow. Yeah, was the one who poses it. And then they did another one about this whole idea of short kings, which theoretically I think I coined the term short kings, because they did a whole, I think once that article or another article maybe came out or another piece came out, they really coined the term short kings. And this idea of someone who has enough wealth, maybe is short, and then goes ahead and does this procedure. And so they did another skit about short kings on Saturday Night Live,
really?
which was pretty funny.
You
But
can just be a king now. You don't have to be a short king.
Yeah,
you can just be a king. Yeah. So, but like I was saying, I think I definitely saw a lot of potential, I think, in the field, and I think also by really opening spaces where people could have a conversation about it,
right?
And even my own patients going out and having conversations about it and saying why they did it and how it's impacted them and how it's changed them, and then I think that really kind of helped to open the idea of what we do. And I still think there's more of that to go. Like I still think that this is in its infancy. I think there's going to be people just like me by the end of my career that's in every single major city in the world. And I think there will be 100 to 1,000x of these cosmetic-based procedures done.
Yeah. Well, how popular is it? Like, can you go in any city and get this done, or are people coming directly to you?
Yes. I would say that there are other, providers, not a lot. There's probably only a handful of them. There's really only, probably 2 of us that do like the highest volume in the world, I think, that are here in the US. But I do think that will change. I think that, as an example, as we grew in popularity with all these, hundreds of media things we've done, the companies noted that they would get hundreds and hundreds of surgeons annually calling to find out how they can get this implant and how they could get teaching and learning on how to do the procedure to add it to their overall practice.
Really?
Have you moved into teaching at all?
I mean, we did a little bit of that initially. So we had quite a few surgeons from, great reputable, centers come to Vegas to watch me do surgery. It's one thing to watch you do surgery and watch how you put them in and watch how, a little bit of it. It's, usually a 24-hour, 48-hour type of learning experience. I'm not sure it's enough. I think the cosmetic realm is a little bit different than I think the traditional orthopedic surgeon and the way that they think. I think there's a lot more aspects to it. And I think, plastic surgeons probably think about it differently, right? Then they're probably uniquely positioned to really think about it, right? When you think about it from what we're offering and marketing and really thinking of it as kind of different than a traditional business, really like a luxury brand or how you get patients in the door. A general orthopedic surgeon just has to put up a sign generally and get his insurance in place and all that sort of stuff. And then or your knee hurts, you need knee replacement. So it's a different way of thinking. I think cosmetic surgeons think a little bit differently than the traditional orthopedic surgeon. I think that does make a difference if trying to enter into the field, in addition to really trying to build up to a high volume center. There have been a lot that have tried, but I think there isn't a lot of support for them. And I think that does hinder their ability to be able to really, build out a practice, but that may change.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to assume any of our listeners know how this works, because there's going to be a lot that don't even know that this is a real thing. It's not science fiction. Walk us through how you do it in the recovery, because if you just kind of skim the internet, you'll see, oh, this is barbarous, this is extreme, you're breaking legs. And I'm sure you have your perspective, which is, not the internet's, right? The internet science.
Yeah. So, I mean, and I think that still exists. I mean, I think, I will say, like, before my time, most of whatever was written about this procedure was like that. I think it was very kind of like you see these frames and all this stuff, and it seems very barbaric.
Scaffolding on the legs.
Right. And I think, I tried to change the image of that, because I really don't think it's like that at all. To be honest, I did 4 of these on Friday, and I think I did 1 on Monday.
Oh, wow.
And so, it's a pretty quick procedure. It takes me about an hour and a half to do from skin to skin. So we can do, 4 patients in a day. I'll give you an example of what an implant looks like. So here's an intramedullary lengthening device. So it's a telescopic rod. These are put in with tiny incisions. You wouldn't be able to even see the incisions in most patients, particularly if they have good scarring, but they're minimally invasive incisions. There's no open cut. It's all done through fluoroscopic assistance. You put the implant in. The break is done through a tiny incision, like probably the width of a blade of a knife, to be able to do it. And then that goes right into the main bone that you're going to be lengthening, either the femur or the tibia. If you're looking at stature lengthening, you can put it in other bones, like you can put it in the humerus and other bones as well. But when looking at stature lengthening or cosmetic limb lengthening, you're generally putting in the lower extremity. You're obviously doing both sides. And then this actually responds to an external remote control that then allows the rod to move. So this rod here is already lengthened out probably about 2.5 inches or something like that. And that's through the lengthening process. This probably was in a patient, and I've just taken it out. These implants are, at least currently, the ones that are on the market, and probably some of the future ones, are still deemed to be, removable devices. So once they've done their job, a year later, we take them out. But putting it in, like I said, takes about an hour and a half generally. You then will start lengthening 5 to 7 days after that with the remote control. So you'll put that on your leg, you push a button, takes about a few seconds, and it slowly
What does that feel like?
Was that all internal? Or is that by magnets, or how?
Yeah, so there are many types of nails. Well, I shouldn't say there's many types of nails. The main nail is really a magnetic technology. So what happens is there's a magnet in here, there's a magnet in the remote control. The magnet spins on the inside and controls the magnet here, which then moves, a series of gearboxes that generates the amount of force to be able to move the telescopic rod out, and it doesn't hurt. I mean, most people think it hurts.
It doesn't. Yeah. It sounds like
So
it hurts.
the screen and there may be different iterations of this, but it's basically like a Samsung Galaxy phone that's inside the actual remote control, and it's a touch screen. It just takes a few seconds, and you lengthen about 1/4 millimeter at a time. So you might do it 4 times a day to get that millimeter a day, and so it takes you about 25 days or so to get an inch. So as you're lengthening the bone, the gap will form between the two segments, and that will slowly fill in. Bone is one of the only tissues in the body, truly only bone and liver, that will actually fill in with itself. It is the only tissue that will make itself. If you cut your skin, you will form a scar. If you get a heart attack, you will have scar. If you have a stroke, you'll have scar tissue there. You'll never really be the same. Bone will form bone. It is one of the only tissues that will do that.
And so, sorry to interrupt you, but I'm fascinated with this idea of bone repairing itself. And does it know not to repair itself beyond the existing margins of the other part of the femur? Or is it not is it going to be relatively smooth, or are you going to look at it and see there's going to be this kind of bump?
Yeah, so
not 2 inches.
You can see some what we call hypertrophy of the actual cortex. Like you can kind of see in this model, there's a little bit of hypertrophy on this cortex, which probably isn't dissimilar. It doesn't really make any difference. Like it's not like you're going to see it, right?
Right.
There's contours to your bone you don't even notice now because they're buried in muscle. So it makes no cosmetic or functional difference at all. Sometimes it'll be flush. Sometimes in certain patients they'll make a little extra bone, and it will kind of push out a little bit as the skeleton develops and changes. We innately change our skeleton. The bone is actually highly metabolic. We kind of cycle through our own skeleton every 7 years. So we break down our own skeleton and build it back up. And so even as you do this procedure and you might see some outpouching that's there, that actually may continue to remodel over the next few years as that patient kind of continues to go. So, but here's an example again of a femur. So this is kind of your hip joint, the ball socket, the knee will be down here. So here's an example of a nail that's going to be put in. You got 2 screws that lock in on the bottom, 2 on the top, and this would be the new segment of bone that grows as it responds to the telescopic magnetic technology that's on the inside that kind of grows the bone itself.
Wow. And you do that all minimally invasively.
So once you put the implant in, the patient goes home with the remote control, and over the next month, 2 months, 3 months, depending on how much their goal is, they're actually doing it on their own.
Wow.
So I will say, people think it's a tough procedure. I want them to think that though, because it actually helps to weed out the people that are maybe thinking about this. But I will tell you this, 95% of my patients work full time, and they have hard jobs. I did a neurosurgeon last summer. He went back doing brain surgery in the East Coast within 2 weeks of this.
Really?
And he went to do back doing call. I've done judges. I've done attorneys, just so you know.
Okay, so I apologize.
All I want to be.
So listen, I'm a victim then of what I've read, in the little short YouTube clips, because you do see a lot of people get on there and say it's so painful. They're stretching the muscle, they're stretching the nerves, and don't think this is without its complications. I mean, when you say 95%, that's like a success rate where you're not having major complications?
No, I mean, our success is probably even higher than that, I would say. Like, we have about 3.3%. I think I reviewed my last 500 cases, and I think our complication rate was about 3.3%. Right. And most of that was through implant issues, which, and that's because the current implant isn't really strong enough, but most of the issues we saw were just implant related. So overall, still a pretty high high success rate. And even those complications are like rectifiable. So if you like cracked the nail, could you tripped and fell on your dog or something, I could just pull it out and put a new one in. So overall, I think, a very high satisfaction rate overall. When I say like, what I mean is like 90% to 95%, right, of my patients go back to doing their full-time work, really, okay, unless they do a labor's job. So I have done every single one of the Mag 7 companies. I have done many of the employees of those companies, many who sit in the boardroom of some of those companies. I have done, people who you have probably seen on TV who were concurrently having this procedure done, who were still on TV while they were lengthening and doing this process.
Wow, really?
So I have done people who are in very well-known bands or, singing groups, I guess I'll call them, ones that are worth upwards of billions of dollars.
Anita, don't mind you dropping their names, just for the listeners to get, a little juicy gossip.
I can't tell, but I've done people here in town. I mean, probably some of them you may even know, maybe not know, but because you can, all I have to say is like, you can still go back to doing a lot of things. Not to say it's not painful. 100% is painful. Okay, it is painful.
What is the pain? Is it the muscles of the nerves stressing?
Initially, it's probably just placing the implant, making the osteotomy in the bone and putting the implant in, right? It's just like if you broke your leg and they had to fix it, you'd say, my leg hurts.
Yeah.
Right? But like those patients, they do get better, right? You see them kind of, I don't know if you've ever had a broken bone or, someone who's had a knee or hip replacement. Initially it hurts. But you talk to them 2 weeks later and it doesn't hurt as much anymore. And they're like kind of becoming more functional and they're getting around and doing stuff. And so I think it's not dissimilar to this. The only difference is that you're continually moving that bone. So you never really get to fully heal so it kind of prolongs the process a little bit. So as you kind of go through it, you have to kind of continue to lengthen. But during that phase, you can still be pretty functional. I mean, you can still, like I said, you guys are both attorneys. So, I've had people go to court and they've gone there and they've had to, talk in front of a jury and do all kinds of stuff and they're able to do that. So I think you can still be relatively functional. There are some expectations that we have as you go through the process. So from the cosmetic realm, I expect that you do, therapy once a day for about an hour, additional hour of stretches.
What kind of therapy?
Just like physical therapy. We have our own therapy in-house at our center.
Oh, good.
And then, post that, I'll allow them to, if they want to go back home, just as long as they're doing it with a physical therapist and they're sending me reports on, kind of every 2 weeks. And then they'll have to get x-rays and that kind of stuff as they kind of go through the process. But yeah, no, they can still be pretty functional. Like I've had patients that go back to high school, university, medical school, residency.
Wow.
So I've had them actually re-enter back fairly competitive, you would think already difficult situations, which I always find surprising that people want to do this in addition to that difficult situation.
Right. There must be a better time for this.
Yeah, I don't know where they get time for this. Yeah, like I've had people where they did the procedure and they went, I've had some people go back to work like within a couple of days.
Really, that fast?
Wow.
Yeah, no, I had a guy.
I thought 2 months minimum. You're before you're really comfortable walking.
I had a guy who was a chemical engineer who worked for us, and he before surgery, in pre-op he was working, and post-surgery he gave a presentation the day of to his company, and virtually, obviously, because he was in the hospital. But you'd be surprised. I think when people are motivated to do something, and I think these patients generally are, they can go pretty far, and they can still be pretty high functioning and be able to get things. I mean, if you just have to, if your legs just hurt, I mean, you can still be relatively functional, right? I mean, you can still drive a car. I generally have my patients drive a car by 2 weeks, and they can return back to a lot of activities. Still, you just maybe not be able to do full activities like running and jumping and all sort of stuff, but you can still be pretty active.
I'm curious, as we're coming up on Christmas, what do your Christmas cards look like? I mean, are they saying, thank you for the salary raise? Thank you for now I'm dating this beautiful woman who otherwise never would have dated me. I mean, do they ever like really get specific and say, doctor, like you've saved me or changed my life? Like, does it ever get dramatic?
Yeah, I mean, look, I've been invited to, I think, about 6 or 7 weddings. So I mean, so that's usually a compliment. I don't think I've gone to any of them. I almost went to one of them.
You almost went to one.
Well, yeah, it's hard to get away. It's just we're always busy. So, but look, I think I've seen it in different perspectives. I mean, like one of the ones that I think is the most meaningful to me is when I get parents that come back, and I've had a lot of parents that come back after they their kids have done this, and you might think that seems weird, like you're doing a 14-year-old or a 15-year-old, but they're gung-ho on doing it. The parents are like on board and they want to do it. During the summer, that's 75% of my patients are below the age of 18 or 20.
Wow.
There's a lot of them.
With the growth plates, you're safe at 14, 15?
Yeah, the growth plates usually closed. I mean, the conversation usually goes, they get a video consult or a consult with the family, and they're devastated because they got their x-rays done and they went to go see the pediatrician, or they're thinking about doing human growth hormone. But oftentimes it's too late, right? So when the problem is that like human growth hormone works really well when you're very small. Okay, so it works ideally when you're like 5 or 6. Okay, but when you're 5 or 6, like I have a 6-year-old and I got a 3-year-old. They don't know how big they are relative to everything else. My daughter's actually kind of small. She might think up to my sister, I think, but she has a shorter stature. She's kind of petite, but she doesn't know. When you do know is, especially maybe as a male, is maybe when you start getting into adolescence, when you're 12, 13, 14, you realize, oh, everyone's bigger than me or taller than me, or people are picking on me, or I feel intimidated by these people. But by then it's actually probably too late to use growth hormone. That's when people go and see the endocrinologist and say, yeah, let's get on this medication. Keep in mind, growth hormone doesn't have a lot of indications. It's for growth hormone deficiency, which is pretty rare, as well as for people who are about 3 standard deviations from the average height. Yet, I think there's about 14 or 15 companies that make recombinant human growth hormone. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Whoa.
And so you can imagine how many kids are on recombinant growth hormone. And it's a very expensive medication. So we did an analysis that showed that based on the price of recombinant growth hormone, it costs almost $100,000 an inch if it truly gives you that inch. So even in some of the best meta-analysis studies about that medication or about that hormone, it shows that maybe it might give you 4 centimeters compared to a control group if you put patients on it young enough, and you generally have to be on it for about 5 years.
Jeez, and you're getting inches in months.
Right. So when you look at it from a surgical perspective, you start thinking, oh, it's not that much length. I can give you that in 30 days or 40 days or something like that, right? And it can arguably maybe be cheaper potentially than growth hormone. So it's just a different way of looking at it. I think if you're very young, then growth hormone could be useful. I think if you're in that sort of adolescent phase, it may not be as useful. And I think what you end up seeing is that you take these people that are 3 standard deviations below the mean, so they're very, very, very short. You give them growth hormone and they end up just very, very short.
Yeah.
They're still not content. And so you get parents that call you and or the child finds you on social media or finds you on the internet or something like that, and then you get a lot of those patients who really feel that this is what they want to do, and the parents are really on board as well. And those are some of the best perspectives that I can kind of see, because I get these parents that come back and they're even years later, and they're like, this is the best thing we ever did.
Yeah,
Like
probably
for
change their confidence tenfold, right?
And I don't know what it is, but parents know their kids, right? I mean, parents know their kids, and having dads come back or moms come back, shake my hand, and say this is a different kid. This is a different kid. And so I had one mom. The kid was a brilliant guy. Went to Columbia, did in the finance world, and really a smart kid. Went through this process and was in New York when he was going through it. Got to the end of it, ended up working on Wall Street. And then, I guess did extraordinarily well and got into private equity or something like that afterwards. And, the mom called me, she was a surgeon, and was this is thanks to you. And I was like, me? I'm like, I wish I could take credit. I was like, I wish I could. I'm pretty sure I had nothing to do with this. No, Dr. D, it was you. It was you. If it was you, he became so successful. He made he broke records in Wall Street, then got picked up by this big company, and he was pretty young still at the time. And he's like, yeah, it's because of what you gave him. And I'm like, I wish I could take credit for that, but I'll take it.
Yeah. So this is part of the controversy, right? And I think it came up in that movie Materialist, where we don't like to acknowledge that something like height could devalue a person's status.
Yeah.
But that is a reality, would you say?
Look, I mean, I think in an ideal world, there's the real world and there's the ideal world, right? I mean, and I guess sometimes you want to live in an ideal world, but sometimes you're in the real world. I mean, so I think there is this idea that some things do matter, right? I mean, it's just the way the world is. I mean, so, they interviewed me for the Materialist a few years ago, so I didn't actually end up watching it. And then a lot of people were emailing me and texting me, like, oh, did you see the movie? Did you see the movie? And I'm like, not really. And so I ended up watching it on Amazon with my wife. And it was interesting. I mean, there was that scene where they're on the windowsill, and as she's talking, I'm like, those are basically my words. She's paraphrasing. But it was kind of cool that, that she was saying it. So, but it was interesting. I think the perspective they gave was interesting, and the way that they, the movie was a little bit different. Obviously, it was about matchmaking and that kind of stuff. Yeah. But they kind of equated this particular attribute in particularly a man of being value, and I think it is valuable, right? I mean, when you think of the oldest saying about a good-looking guy, tall, dark, and handsome, right? I mean, the first one's tall.
Yep.
I mean,
right.
Even when I was doing this, when I was younger, and I thought, I'd go around and ask 20 of my girlfriends, would you date a guy who's skinny? Mm. And then say, yeah, I guess so. A little lean, it's not a big deal. Most of them said yes. Would date a guy who's overweight, a little chubby or something like that? And I'm like, yeah, no, it's could be cute, it could be snuggly, that kind of stuff. I'm like, would you date a guy 3 inches shorter than you? I don't think any of them said that. What do you think?
Oh, putting you on the spot.
Yeah, I mean, I've dated guys that were shorter than me. I definitely look at the tallest guy in the crowd. I think I've been conditioned that way. And we were talking about it earlier, and I think part of it is my own insecurities. I'm a really tall girl, so I want to feel small in somebody's embrace. So I think that relatively it has to do with me. But to your point, would you date somebody 3 inches shorter than you? It would be something to get over as the GQ.
Well, and in all my conversations leading up to this conversation, when I'm talking about we're going to have this doctor on, and he's in the top of this field, it's so funny. It's your classic, until you're in that person's shoes, you can't judge them, because all these guys are like, no, I would never do that. And it's like, okay, well, I'm 6'2", and that's easy for me to say, and it's easy for someone who's 5'10" or even 5'9". Once I frame the question, it's okay, well, what if you were 5'1" or 5'2"? You immediately you get the blank stare, and it's like, okay, well, yeah, then I would absolutely, if I had the money and I had the time and the resources, then it switches. So there is this sliding scale of well, no, I would never. Well, no, I actually might, and no, I probably would, right?
Yeah.
So, and you don't make the rules?
I don't make the rules. I mean, we found an arena that I think is, and I think that there's an evolutionary bias. I mean, I don't even think it's a societal bias. I mean, they did a study back at Harvard where they looked at looking at bias, and they found that height was more or as significant of a bias in the current day as the color of your skin.
Wow.
Or your race. But I think it's worse than that, because those are only social. Those are not real things. The color of your skin, what religion you are, they all made those up, right? A bazillion years ago, we didn't have those things, right? In the sense of these are all social things, what country you're from or what, doesn't exist millions of years ago.
Never
right?
thought of that.
But height always existed. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I think that it is.
And what you could do because you were tall.
Correct. So it's evolutionary. Would you take on a bear? I wouldn't.
I would not.
Would so it's primitive, right? There's this primitive side to what it is, right? I mean, you don't take on, if someone's walking up to you and they're 6'10", this big guy, you're gonna move out of the way. Mm-hmm. Right? There's this idea of what it is, and they've seen that. They've seen it in psychological studies. They've looked at trying to judge the height of someone who is a superior, and they almost always artificially increase their height. So let's say you're looking at a professor from a far away distance, you'd be like, oh, how tall is he? And, they have like a survey and they'll do it. It'll always be more than the actual height of the actual person, because there's a connection between this idea of height and stature with exactly what it is, stature. And that stature is, where they sit in the world in some ways. And I think it's true. I mean, look at they always give these statistics, but the Fortune 500 CEOs, the average height is like 6'2". How is that possible? That's not the average.
The top 500 companies, how is the average of 6'1"?
I think like every singular U.S. president except one has been over 6 foot.
Really?
Donald Trump is like 6'2", 6'3". Obama over 6. Biden, every single one. I think the one was like, I don't know how many years ago too. But every single one has been over 6 foot. How is that possible?
And then the one leader,
one leader
that's super, super short, you get Napoleon complex, right? And he's the guy that we use as the example of, well, you can't be powerful and short without having.
I mean, look, Trump ended up winning, and who was trying to run against him? Bloomberg, who has way more money than him, right? Way more money, right? Bloomberg is like synonymous with finance and that sort of stuff. Way more wealthy and successful when you look at it from like what he's done in the world, maybe compared to Trump to some degree. What was Trump's insult to Bloomberg when he ran?
Did he seriously go after his height? I don't remember.
That's what he said. He would call him short because he was 5'8", I think. That was the only thing, and it became the running joke during that thing. And then
you can control it. Well, you can.
You can't control, but I mean, but it's funny. That's what he. But I thought it was kind of funny when I saw it. I thought, oh, that's an interesting. Like, of all the things he could pick at, I mean, he was a clearly successful businessman, and his name is synonymous with the world of finance,
right,
and so many things, and
And at the end of the day, you want to think of height being non-material to that fight, to that race, right?
Yeah.
But
even look
is it if all of them have been taller than 6 feet?
Even what's his name with Ted Cruz? What was the whole running joke with him is the cowboy boots he wears. It's Ted Cruz? Yeah, I think it's Ted Cruz. Remember, they're all showing his like platform shoes on the on the videos, because he's always wearing those big cowboy boots, and there's like a 4-inch or 5-inch lift in them. So he's always trying to increase his height, because it probably there is translation to that. I mean, I 100% saw that when I got actors, for instance, who came and saw me. And they were like, most people think like, oh, this is like a cosmetic thing. You just want to be taller because you want to attract a partner or something like that. But to be honest, that isn't really always the motivation. And sometimes maybe it's not the motivation at all in a lot of circumstances, actually. And then when I started getting actors that come see me, I say, oh, why are you getting this done? You're like, you're 5'8", or, decent height. They're like, oh, I can't get any roles in my
really
job.
I need to be Nicole Kidman height.
No, like they literally would show me look, I'm trying to go for this role, and literally like obviously they can literally discriminate on the way you look, because I need the person to be 5'11", I need the person to be like brown hair, like things you can change.
They're saying literally I can't get this role.
Yeah, so literally there are many roles that they cannot get because of their height.
Wow.
So there are many actors who get this done because of that role. Because they're limited. If they're 5'6", there's not a lot of roles you may be able to play. And so I do think that, even looking at it from like that just definitive standpoint, like, look, you can't get this job unless you're 5'11". Like, you would think that doesn't exist. But then the more I've done this, the more I've seen people show me like, oh yeah, actually it does exist.
So I'm really curious, as the doctor that does the surgery, what kind of boundaries have you had to put up in terms of like, listen, I'm not your therapist, I'm not your best friend. Like, I mean, they try to probably pull you into this conversation of like, well, should I do it? And I'm struggling with this, the emotional side of it, the psychological side of it. Like, do you put up some pretty firm boundaries and walls around like where you cross that line?
Yeah, I mean, so I'll still I try to get to know the patients fairly well. Like generally that will start with like a 30 to 60 minute kind of chat with them virtually, like with a video, to see if like do you have the right things to even consider doing this. And then I'll see them in person. That'll be another hour and a half visit, and I'll do some screening tests, like things like major depression and BDD, which is body dysphoria and that kind of stuff, just to make sure that there's no like outliers that I'm like, because I just feel like if there are these like like a patient I saw yesterday that I didn't feel comfortable at all doing any procedure on, if I don't feel comfortable, then I don't think I'm the guy for you. Like, I just don't think that what I can do as a surgeon and change these parameters about your body essentially, is going to change the way you feel or what you need in life. So I do spend a lot of time kind of think, how long you've been thinking about this, what are your motivations, why do you want to do this, like, what got you to this point, and I really try to focus on those things. And a lot of times they're varied, but I also don't try to judge them by it, because I've had some tall people who come see me and I'm thinking, you're tall.
You're fine. Yeah.
I was like, you're tall. I'm like, what do you want from me? But in some ways it's all perspective, right? I mean, like, I've had patients that are 5'10" and all their brothers are 6'5". I'm thinking of the patient right now, actually, who I was like, and very good looking guy, like, built, like, nice features. You're thinking, okay, you got to be doing well in life here and good job and all that sort of stuff. And I'm like, why do you want to do this? And he's like, well, all of my brothers are like 6'5", and my dad's like, 6'4" or something. And I'm like, okay. So he's like, I'm the short one. And I'm like, oh, that's an interesting perspective that you feel short at your height. Yeah. So and as you get to know them and look at what the motivations are and look at some of their background, then you start thinking, okay, I think that's not unreasonable then, I think, to look at moving forward with this and getting this done. But I do think you have to kind of get to know the patients more so than someone who comes in with, broken bone, or someone comes in with a back problem where it's like, oh, that's pretty obvious.
What's a red flag for you for, like, this is not something that's going to help you in the end?
There's a couple, I think. I mean, I think unrealistic expectations. I mean, in what you think this will accomplish for you. I mean, I even when I talk to parents who want to get this done for their child or the kids that are getting it done, I'm like, look, I don't think I'm gonna make you a different person. You're not gonna be a different person. I'm gonna change this one parameter about you, and what you do with that or how that makes you feel when you walk into a room, and it may change, right? Like it may make you feel different, right? So and that is what you kind of do with it. But I think some people, they may have unrealistic expectations, or they're not really doing it necessarily for the right reasons, or maybe there is a deeper dysphoria that's behind it that I think I just can't cure. There's no limitation to what I can do that will make you feel better about yourself. And I think you have to be careful that, some surgeons might disagree with that. I think some surgeons feel that they can really cut out this dysphoria, and have had people say that, where they're like, oh, I can treat this psychiatric problem with the surgery. I'm not sure that's true. I do think that is an intrinsic issue, and that may not be resolved with just changing some physical attribute necessarily, and sometimes it's never enough. So I think you have to be careful about that, and I think you have to really kind of get to know the patient and where they're coming from. And I think doing a couple screening tests and talking to the people and talking to patients, kind of getting a little bit of the background. Sometimes you get to meet people, like their family or friends or people around them, wives, husbands. You can kind of get an idea of what the motivation is for, where did it stem from, what is it that's kind of, pushing you forward. And you'd be surprised. I mean, we get all walks of life. I mean, you get patients that, I think you're probably thinking, my patient. That's what you're thinking. You're thinking, oh, I know his patient. Everyone thinks, I've been on all these talk shows and, documentaries, and everyone's like, I know your patient. Your patient's going to be this 20-year-old guy who's kind of short, who wants to pick get a hot babe or something.
Right.
Yeah.
But
that's not the patient.
That's the stereotype.
Yeah, but it's not always like I've had patients that have grandkids. They've been happily married for 50 years.
Right.
The patient I just talked to a couple yesterday, married, have kids. So it's not always that person. I have, like I said, I have female patients. 20% of patients are female.
20%? I would not have thought it was that high.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Yeah.
My oldest patient is, I think he's 70.
Your youngest was 14, maybe?
No, probably younger, maybe like 12. Like from a cosmetic perspective, you can even start earlier depending on, if they've had premature growth plate closes. And
what are you declining politely? Someone like what percentage are you listen, I don't think, from a mental health standpoint, this is right for you.
So there isn't a huge percentage of that. I would say maybe 5 to 10%. I would say, depending on how far they get. I mean, if I meet them in person, they've gotten a little further. Sometimes I can screen that already in the video, kind of chat with them, and I'll say, I don't know if this is the right thing for you, or I kind of sort of just disappear on them in some ways. Yeah. It kind of goes because. Yeah, you have to feel comfortable, and generally, like, I get along with my patients. Especially these patients, I'm very close to them. Like, I know a lot about what they do. A lot of them are extraordinarily successful, like way more successful than I. To be honest, I feel like I learn stuff from them. From the finance industry to like engineering or political types of connections, that kind of stuff. So like they really have like a very interesting background.
Can I
demographic.
pause you there? I wonder if that doesn't have something to do with the fact that they're willing to do this. It's like that. Is it this mindset of they don't take no for an answer? They're going to do whatever they want to do and whatever it takes to look the way they want to look, make the money they want to make, have this life they want to have. I mean, do you feel like there's maybe a correlation there, which is a mindset?
Yeah, no, I think there's definitely some patients.
You're talking about a lot of successful people.
Yeah, no, I think the price of the procedure kind of like maybe also is a biased. So it all
What does it cost?
You're looking at least about $80,000, I think, for primary surgery. That may be kind of slowly going up as implant technology goes up and that kind of stuff. But you're looking at least around that price point and above.
And there's a cost. Do you have to remove the?
There's a cost to remove
hardware?
the device, also, which generally runs somewhere between $14,000. But yeah, so overall, just based on that, there's already a bias to kind of select a certain part of the population, and no, because of that, I think you'll find generally the more successful people in there. And then you might find people that can do anything, and so they think, okay, look, this is just something I've always wanted. Kind of like my 70-year-old patient actually, who was a very successful architect, and he's actually very open. He's done a couple of TV shows with me. He did the largest UK morning show. It's like he's originally British.
What's his name?
Rory Khan. So he did a show with me a few years ago. It was really early in the morning for me. I didn't actually go to the UK, but I just did it via Zoom. But it's their version of like whatever the Today Show or something like that, and it's been running for like 75 years or something. So. But he was very proud of doing it, and he did really well. And went from 5'6" to 5'9", and I didn't, for the longest time I actually rejected him. So I kind of ghosted him.
Because of his age?
Yeah. I heard his age and I was like, okay.
Ageism.
So I was like, I think he was like 69 when he tried to reach out to me, and I was thinking, I'm not going to do your surgery, dude. So just, return his money. Don't even bother booking the consult. And I think I did that to him 3 times, and he kept pushing and pushing. And I was like, all right, fine, I'll talk to this person. And so I talked to them, and then, it wasn't him that convinced me. It was actually his wife. She was in the background on the video chat, and I was like, "Who's that lady behind you?" And he was a successful guy, architect, drove sports cars for fun, raced cars, had the best life ever, had grandkids, like just had the life you would hope to, like that's the life you're aiming for. like that's the life you want to get to. And I'm thinking, at this point in your life, like, why do you want this? And he's like, I just want to know what it's like to be. He was 5'6". I think he just wanted to know what it's like to be 5'9". He's always wanted to know. And I was like, okay. And I saw his wife in the background. And I said, hey, who's up? Can I bring you up to the camera so I can talk to her? And I was like, how long you guys been married? And I think they married like 40 something years. So and I was like, you're gonna let him do this? Because she's been hearing everything in the background, and she's like, Dr. D, we were married, 45, 47 years, whatever it was. And he hasn't asked me for anything, but he asked me for this.
Oh, really?
And I thought, and she seemed like the most, he was British and she's American. And I thought, this seems like a pretty reasonable answer. I said, you know what, let's do it. And then we did it, and he did really well. And shows you actually like, it made no difference. I mean, he did just as well as my 20-year-olds or any of my other patients, and he was very satisfied he did it. I remember before we took out his implants, he had played around the Gulf in Arizona with his friends and for a weekend, and then he came to Vegas to have his implants taken out, and I was like, oh, how are things going? He's like, I just hit the best weekend of golf of my life, actually, so it's going pretty good. I was like, okay. And so you never know. I mean, I think it attracts people from all walks of life, if they feel that this may be something that they're lacking in for whatever the reason.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Is there any long-term consequence of doing this? I think of osteoporosis, and I'm like, I don't know, does it affect the bone in any way?
Yeah, I mean, once the bone solidifies, we don't see any changes. Keep in mind, we've been, pulling bone apart for, not 100 years, but probably close to 75 years. So we do have an understanding of what it is that happens, and we don't see any kind of big repercussions when it comes to like the bone and even the joint alignment, because everything is extra articular, meaning that we're lengthening the long bone of the femur, tibia, humerus, whatever it may be. So we're really staying outside of the joint itself. So we don't see any risk to like arthritis necessarily, changes in biomechanics. What does change though is the lever arm of the muscles. Okay.
The lever on the muscles.
The lever arm of the muscle. So basically, if I made your quadriceps 2 inches longer, that muscle will be 2 inches longer. So the lever arm of that muscle does change a little bit, and there may be some changes secondary to that. So what we see is that I generally will counsel patients that, if you do this, then there may be some potential effect on your athleticism. So your high level athleticism can be affected by 10% potentially, because you're permanently changing that soft tissue. And it's truly the soft tissue that makes the biggest difference in the patient, not necessarily the bone or the architect around the joints. Having said that, I have done Division I athletes that play.
Have you really? See, I was gonna jump in and say, let's be honest, people aren't coming and doing this and then they can dunk a basketball and they can do really aggressive sports like football or basketball, but you have done Division I athletes?
Yeah, that's a very common consult. So we get a lot of parents with their kids that,
Want that edge.
that they want the edge. Yeah, so the, UCLA scouting them or...
But it doesn't work like that, does it?
I don't know. I can't think of one of my patients that actually went to the NBA or something, but I mean, I have done patients that were Division I and went back to playing Division I sports. So you can still maintain a high level of athleticism. Like I know some patients that I know well that, are still very athletic after the process. Like some patients that I got, a person who lives in my neighborhood that I did his legs years ago, and, he's still pretty athletic, probably more athletic than I am. He's probably at least over a decade older than I am. So
Wow.
he still runs marathons. I think he can run an 8-minute mile. So I don't think I can do that. So you can still be athletic. I do think I would counsel them, and I think I do try to dissuade those individuals, like if they're doing it to get that edge in football or basketball, particularly basketball. It could be a double-edged sword in that sense, right? You could gain this height, but you could lose some fast twitch ability or some speed or something else that may not be compensated by that additional length. But it is an extraordinarily common consult.
Well, because this is so new and because there's so much people don't know about leg lengthening, are there any other misperceptions out there that you would really love to clean up and just, let people know once and for all, like, listen, it doesn't do this, or it doesn't fix that, or it doesn't have this complication? Anything we haven't addressed where it'd be nice to just set the record straight?
I mean, look, I think the images around it or what it is evolving. I would say that it's not fully there yet. I think if you looked at the subject matter 10 years ago, you'd see terrible stuff written about it and just horrendous stuff. I think that's evolved a little bit where, now you're seeing some more positive stuff and you're seeing patients talk about it. And I think it will continue on that path, because I do think that this could one day be something that is just something we do, right? I mean, something that is, I think in the right hands. I should be careful with that, because I do think that there are still complications out there. I think, this surgery got banned in China.
Did it? Really?
So the government of China, which, they're China, they do those. So it was so popular in China years ago because everyone in China wants to be taller, that nurses were doing it, chiropractors were doing it. And back then we didn't have this technology. We had external frames.
This is when they were doing it with the external fixators?
Correct. And that is much more intricate and requires much more training to be able to do it in that sense. So they were trying to do it, but they were maiming people. And so it got this bad rap because the idea was there, but I think the skill set and the technology wasn't there.
The demand was ahead of...
Correct, yeah. The demand is always there, right? I mean,
right.
And I still think there's some catch up to do with that as well. I think, there are hands out there, there is skill set out there that can do this extraordinarily well with an extraordinarily low rate of complication with the right technology. But I do think that it does get ahead of itself a little bit. And I think, we should be careful with, just allowing everyone to do it as well. I think it should be kind of like well trained people that we are trying to get to the point. I do think it can get to that point, because I think if you look at, 4 or 5 of the high volume centers, I think they'd probably say the same thing. I think their complication rate is minimal.
Very well.
I think the complication is less than a lot of cosmetic procedures. Like I talked to my colleagues that are plastic surgeons, and the most synonymous thing with a plastic surgeon is breast augmentation. Okay. And I talked to I got a lot of friends that are plastic surgeons, and I say, okay, well, let's say you put these breasts in a 18-year-old or 19-year-old. What is the chance you're going to have to do surgery on that patient again? And they're like, I don't know, 400%. like 400%. Like, so you're gonna have to go back and revise the breast augmentation like possibly 4 times, or it's at least 100%, right? Like there's no way that augmentation will likely last until that person is 75 or 80, right? Because they'll get capsular contraction, they'll get something else, they, it may change in morphology a little bit, and they may have to go back and revise them, change the implant side, change something about it potentially, right? So there's a lot of revision rates potentially with these types of surgeries. But that procedure, which is like synonymous when you think of a cosmetic plastic surgeon, is basically their defining surgery in some ways. Yet I think it still has, I guess it's an acceptable complication rate, but it's still pretty high complication rate. If someone told you, hey, why don't you do this procedure, but the complication rate is like, there's a 50% chance I'm taking you back to surgery, you would say, oh, that doesn't sound like a good procedure, right? Like that doesn't sound like a good procedure. But, I think in our procedure, I think that's actually a lot lower, and I think once it is done6 Like you that work lasts forever. You will die and decompose, and your casket will be 3 or 6 inches longer. It will be there forever.
Mm.
Yeah, Ash had a procedure, and it was interesting. What you told me, Ash, where you said something about you felt like you were in your body, or what did you say about?
Yeah, so I had a breast reduction surgery. Which actually is not a surgery that they have to go back and revise very often. And so for me, I had large breasts since I was in middle school, and I was worried about the identity shift that was going to happen when I got it done. But actually, I feel more inside my body than ever. So it is interesting to me, like cosmetic surgery has this controversial mindset to it, but to your point, until you're in somebody's body and you're walking in their shoes, you really don't know how any surgery is going to affect them or be beneficial to them.
No, I agree. I think, I think it is more meaningful than you think. I think obviously addressing pathology and fixing pain or getting rid of this type of thing like an injury or something like that and making that resolved is extraordinarily meaningful as well. This isn't necessarily pain per se. I think it's something else, but I think people are aware of it, like having maybe a mole or something or a blemish on their skin that they're just so aware of, that they're always hiding, that they're always every time they go out in the world they cover up, or they their whole identity and who they are revolves around this little thing. And imagine being able to be like bloop, and you take it off, and all of a sudden you no longer have that thing.
Sure.
And you're completely different. Like you the way you enter a room, the way you go about life, it no longer is that small hindrance that you were self-conscious about. So
yeah, it's so true. Like that actually happened with me in high school because they were so noticeable and they got so much attention that my posture was bad because I was constantly trying to make them smaller. So ever since getting it done, my stature's different, and so it's pretty incredible.
Well, it's nice to see the stigmas come down and some of them go away entirely. My 17-year-old, I thought he made a pretty astute analogy where he, just in talking about this podcast coming up, he said, Dad, it's almost like, you see the Forrest Gump, you picture Forrest Gump with all these external braces and he runs and they all fly off, or you see Gattaca or these shows where they've got the tightening is all external. Well, we used to have the mouth guards, right? The pieces, and they make fun of the kids in the 80s movies and the John Hughes movies, and they'd have the mouth guard, right? And then we got braces, and then we got clear braces, and then we got Invisalign. Yeah. And it's like, I'm just wondering where you think this is going to go and how fast you think it can get there in terms of this becoming not just the butt of a joke on SNL, not just something that they kind of use in a movie to point out, like, should we care about height? Where do you think it's going? How fast do you think it'll take to get there?
Yeah, so I think it's on that path. I think if you look at like even some of like the analysis of like even our website, for instance, like we look at unique users visiting the website, and Limb Plastics Institute is really just more focused on cosmetic, and I look at that data once in a while, and we get about 30,000 unique users I think per month that like look at this particular subject matter, which I always think is like
30,000.
Yeah, which is an impressive number, right? Like I'm thinking, oh, it's a lot. It's a lot of unique people that are looking for this particular thing.
A month.
And so it's interesting. I mean, so like there clearly is demand on both sides, I think, right? I mean, like whether it's I think, like I said, I think, we're at the dam and there's a little bit of trickle and, we're seeing this, but I do think there's this kind of there's this demand, I think, that is truly there that maybe people may not talk about or admit or that sort of stuff. And I think even on the surgeon perspective, I think there's a lot of interest on that perspective. I get called all the time, or people reach out to me, and I think there's even a demand on that side to want to offer this type of procedure as something just that changes it up. It could be something that they offer within their practice, and so I think there's a really kind of demand on both sides. So I think that helps. So I think at least from the cosmetic realm, I do think this will be 100x, 1000x by the time I think I'm done my career. I think that there'll be something like a plastic surgery in every major city in the world, and I think that this will become more acceptable. Why? Because I know what they don't know. I know what no one knows, and a few of us in the world know. We know what the results are, the true results, and we know that you can probably get the complication down to like 1.5%, and this can be a super highly successful procedure that really does what you think it's going to do.
It changes people's lives.
Yeah, no, and you get the jokes and you get this. I got invited to Kevin Hart's Netflix show, or his Netflix kind of special on, and he opens with a 4-minute bit about this process. And I got fortunate to be sitting in the audience while he joked about it, but he got it all wrong. He's talking about injecting fat in your knee and all sort of stuff, and but that's fine.
You laugh, but the truth.
But it's almost phases, right? I mean, I think there's a German philosopher, I can't remember his name now, but there's like the different phases of like acceptance they talk about, right? And then the first phase being like kind of like no, we're not going to do this, like or maybe it's ridicule, and then it's blatant, like we're not doing this, and then finally like kind of this realization, like yes, this is here to stay, and we're going to do it. So and I think all things have gone through that, like, right? If you think about like things like breast augmentation to other things like that. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Breast Men with David Schwimmer. It's kind of like an interesting perspective of like sometimes what I feel I go through with this process. It was a movie back in the 90s, and he was at Baylor, and he started using breast augmentation instead of cancer reconstruction. He just started putting it in women, and then there's all these scenes with him with strippers, and at the end of the movie he does die because he does too much cocaine and gets hit by a car or something. But
it's not a good ending.
But he wasn't, Baylor kicked him out because they thought, why are you doing this? This is not meant for this, and that sort of stuff. But in the end, he ended up being right? I mean, in the end, he ended up, taking a procedure that really, like I mentioned before, became synonymous with what plastic surgeons do in some ways, right? So this idea of what it is. So I do think that we will get there. I think there's more hurdles. I think both from the technology standpoint, I think from the skill set standpoint, because it's not something that is routinely taught to like an orthopedic surgeon or a surgeon in general. But I think there'll be more demand for it as we see in the younger population who want to come do fellowships or learn about this process more. As we see the technology evolve, we'll be able to do this more. We've done it pretty MIS. Maybe we can get even more MIS. Maybe we can have the implants even be stronger so patients can return back to full function within 2 weeks, be able to like re-engage with more aggressive activities, that kind of stuff. I think also the idea of like these mobile implants, they really open a door to other things, right? We have implants that we push a button and we can move. With this capacity, it really opens the idea of these smart implants in the world, right? I mean, and I really think that is true. I think, if I can put this implant in and my patients are walking 3 to 4 hours after surgery, and then 2 to 3 months, they're, 3.5 inches taller, I'm thinking, well, that's pretty miraculous with a push of a button. What else can I do? Mm-hmm. And I do think that what else is really kind of exciting, because I do think you could think about it from, changing a total joint. You can look at changing a spinal deformity. You can look at changing soft tissue things. You can look at it from a lot of different perspectives of, if I was able to collect information from a patient, so the smart capability, and I was able to then evoke a change to that, what other things pathologies can I change in the body with this technology? And a lot of what we do, orthopedics, I mean, it's a $70 billion, worldwide industry. A lot of our implants are really based on the ability to restore this biomechanics. Imagine that entire industry being revolutionized by the idea of being able to do that and tweak it if need be. And so I think that really opens the door for even better outcomes in patients when it comes to a broader perspective of this technology. So, but like I said, I think even in the cosmetic realm, I think this will be a multi-billion-dollar industry. I think that this will be a very vast thing that when people know what we know 10 years from now, or what I know 10 years from now, I think they will see that, this truly is a much broader field and a much broader market. I think that as it grows, they will see how big it will become.
Before I turn you over to Ash for our final question, where can people find you? I know that you have an office here, Limb Plastics with an X on the end of that. We're with Dr. Kevin Debiparshad, the preeminent leg lengthening doctor in the world, not just the country. Anywhere else people can find you?
Yeah, so they can find us on social media. Limb Plastics Institute is our handle on Instagram. They can go to our website, www.limbplastics.com. So, you can probably Google us or Google me.
Not hard to find. Yeah, we've never been more overwhelmed getting ready for a podcast because it was just endless information and videos.
Yeah.
But thank you for coming on our podcast. Thank you for educating our listeners. I certainly have learned a lot. I would love for this field of science and cosmetic surgery to move out of that phase of just jokes and being referenced in movies and whatnot quicker, because I think, like you're saying, there's a lot of opportunity for this to not just make people a little bit taller, but to also make them feel better about themselves, and like Ash talked about with her procedure, just feel more in their body.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think it's very transformational. Just like your experience was, it's the same thing with these procedures. It really is. I mean, like, just like you feel like you're you, you're in your skin, you're like, just imagine that like thing in the back of your head that was there all the time, that made you aware in every social circumstance. Anytime you went to the pool, anytime you did those things, it was always there. And imagine just taking that away and who you were after that. It makes a significant difference. I think all these things make more difference than you think, unless, and I think we all have something about ourselves that we all do. I mean, no one, maybe not you, Joe.
Oh, I would like broader shoulders. I would like broader shoulders. Can you broaden me?
You can do that.
Okay, we're going to talk after the show.
I had a piece, I can't remember the magazine, but they interviewed me for it. So there is a clavicle osteotomy you can do to shorten it. So a lot of transgender patients get it. It's called clavicle shortening, to actually take, if you're going from male to female, then it actually narrows your shoulder. Or you could do the opposite by lengthening the clavicle to broaden your shoulder.
There you go, Joe.
Okay, well, we're gonna have you back on to talk about clavicle lengthening. I love that. I'm gonna walk through door for you.
Yeah. That's okay.
That's amazing.
So real quick question. We're attorneys on accident because we feel like we got where we are, attorneys, now podcasters, a little bit by accident on the journey of life. You work in a very niche field, did a very niche thing. Do you feel like you are the premier leg lengthener in the world by accident?
Yes. Is that how I answer that?
And that's how we end the podcast.
I think a lot of things happen. Should we say accidents or luck or circumstance, or I think that's how life is, right? I mean, if you asked me, a kid who grew up in Montreal, Canada, would I be sitting here in Las Vegas and be who I am? And you told me that, I'd say there's probably zero chance of that. I would think, right? There's almost zero chance. Like if someone told me, I think my wife says that all the time. She's from Milwaukee, and we would have never imagined who we were today in some ways. But I think we're grateful. I think that is the that's how life is. I mean, you kind of have to roll with the punches, and you kind of have to, you see something that someone else doesn't see, or you don't, or you just these circumstances that present themselves, you just start walking through some of those doors, and it gets you to where you need to go. And an accident for you, or a circumstance for someone else, or but that's just how life is.
Well, certainly grateful that you walked through all those doors that opened for you. We're grateful for this conversation, and hopefully we can have you come back, maybe talk about some innovations or where it goes. But thank you for your time. It's been an honor.
No.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for you guys having me.
All right. Thank you.